If you've been following me on YouTube, you probably noticed that I made a post about these TVs right here, and you guys have showed out and showed me which TV you like. Most of the people who responded to this post preferred TV B, but the question is, which TVs are you actually looking at? Well, here's the answer. On the left hand side, we have the Samsung S95F with the matte screen, and on the right hand side, we have the Sony Bravia. Now, both of these TVs are QD-OLED, and they both have great pictures, but the question is, which TV should you buy and which TV has the best picture overall? On this video, I'm going to show you some demos so we can see which TV is going to be the best one for you and your family. Let's get into it. And just so you know, I'm not going to cover all of the details on these TVs because I made a full video that you can go check out on each one. But for now, let's take a look at the glare. The Samsung uses a matte finish, and this is on the Sony, but let's go over to the Samsung. And as you can see here, it's a huge difference in the reflection on this television with that matte finish. Now, some people don't like that, but look how good it's doing compared to the Sony. And I will tell you, both of these TVs have a great coating on them. Now we're going to take a look at the viewing angles. So here we have next to the Sony, and the viewing angles are pretty good on both TVs. Again, OLED has that technology that's going to look fantastic when it comes to viewing angles. And now we're over here by the Samsung, and again, it still looks good on the Sony. So viewing angles will not be a problem on either of these TVs. Just want to let you know, I'm going to factory set both TVs, and the Samsung is going to be in movie mode and the Sony will be in cinema mode. These are the settings that they want to have from the factory to give you the best experience. And I will tell you, when you're doing comparison videos, there will never be a perfect answer, but this will give you a rough idea. The first thing I want to show you is that the Samsung does have a faster response time. So as I go down this list, you can see that it loads up faster than the Sony, and I do have both of them in 4K mode, and the Sony is enhanced mode. So the Samsung has a faster interface, but it does use the Tizen operating system, which is something that a lot of people like, but some people don't like. Now on the Sony, it uses a Google interface, so it's going to be something you're a little more familiar to because a lot of people use Google products in their home. With that being said, let's pull up some demos and take a look at these two titans of televisions. Now the first thing we're going to take a look at is watching your everyday television, and to me they look very similar. Sometimes when I play this footage back, I can see it a little bit different, but right now looking at these televisions side by side, they look pretty identical. Now changing to a different station, I do notice that the Sony has better color as far as the grass, even though this is not a high resolution signal. And it looks like the green and the red pops just a little bit more to me. And again, both of these TVs are in their native movie mode and not the sports mode. But that gives you an idea of what to expect when watching TV and the colors that you're going to get. Now this is a movie trailer of Superman, and one thing I noticed is that the artifacts on the Sony are a little bit more than the Samsung. And one thing I could tell as well is that the Sony has slight better shadow details right in this area, but you may not be able to catch that on camera, but that's what I'm seeing here. As far as color reproduction, I think the Sony has a little bit more natural color to it than the Samsung, but both TVs are doing a great job. Another thing I noticed, again, when it comes to those shadow details, on this particular scene, they're pretty lined up. Now this will show us the contrast on it, and I'll turn the lights off just for a quick second so we can see the black levels a little bit more. And one thing I can notice is that there's a little artifacts on both TVs. Again, this is not the highest quality resolution, but the Samsung appears to have a little bit better dark levels than the Sony. Now it's very slight, but as I can see here, it depends on the scene that we're watching. The Samsung edges out the Sony just a little bit, but for the most part, it all depends on what you're watching. Now, I would say that the black levels are going to be great because these are QD-OLED televisions. So no matter which TV that you're looking at, I think you're going to be fine either way. It just depends on what you like and how this video ends up and as far as looking at the colors. And here's one last demo for us. And again, they look pretty similar to me in here in the dark. Not really much I can see, and a lot of people are saying that you lose some of the different characteristics of the screen when you have that matte finish that the Samsung has on it. But I'm telling you right now, I don't even notice it, and maybe you will, but I don't. And here's another dark scene for us to take a look at. And again, here live, both TVs look very similar. But let me go ahead and turn on the light so we can do some other demos. And I'm also checking to see if I see a reflection of myself in the televisions. And I would say that I don't really see it on either one. The televisions are doing a great job. Now let's take a look at some different picture profiles, and both TVs are in SDR mode. But I like this scene because you got the hair there, you got a little bit of background, and you do have some shadow details around the neck area. Now let's take a look at the picture differences in SDR content. In vivid mode, the Samsung is not as bright as the Sony. You can see that it's extremely bright, but the Samsung does have some settings that I didn't really want to mess with, but we'll go down here and look at the brightness. So right now it's at 33%. Now let's put it all the way up to 100%. And here's the differences. One thing I noticed on the Sony is that if you look right here, there's just a lot more brightness that is happening around the screen. But I do know the Samsung is extremely bright when it's in HDR mode. Now we have both TVs in standard mode. As you can see, the Sony is at maximum brightness and the Samsung's at 30%. One thing about this mode, I can notice Sony has a lot more details. If you just look at the color of the hair compared to the Samsung, the standard mode to me looks better on the Sony. Next, we're switching back over to the cinema and movie mode. The Sony's at max brightness, the Samsung's only at 17. So these settings can definitely change the way the picture looks. So if I put the Samsung at 100% brightness, just like the Sony, now in this particular mode, the Samsung actually looks brighter, but to me, I still like the hair colors on the Sony over the Samsung. The shadow detail seems to be around the same, and the color reproduction, by cranking up the brightness on the Samsung, I think it could win in this situation, but I still like the skin tones better on the Sony. I will go reset this back to factory in just a minute, but just so you know, other picture profiles, the Samsung has equal mode, and it has filmmakers mode while in SDR. Now the Sony, on the other hand, has a lot more picture profiles. We have your cinema, we have your professional, we have calm, we have photo, we have IMAX enhanced. Now I have the TVs in HDR mode, and looking at this, the Samsung is a much brighter picture in HDR. Now keep in mind, they do have similar picture profiles. Let's take a look at that. So right now I have the Samsung in dynamic, the Sony in standard. And I don't like the fact that Samsung has this menu that goes over the screen. So here's your standard mode. And again, the Samsung looks much better as far as brightness and details. If I go over here, you can see that the Sony's is maxed out in brightness. You'll have to go in and adjust the peak luminance to get more out of it. But that's your standard mode right from the factory. And then we have the eco mode, movie mode. And now we have the Sony in cinema mode. So this is a comparable picture with the same settings. And again, and one thing I do notice is that the Samsung has better shadow details. If you look at the hair on the Sony, around some of the different edges, it does kind of lose a lot of that details in comparison to the Samsung. And the Samsung does have filmmakers mode whilst in HDR as well. So there's all the different picture profiles. And I think the Sony beats it out just because you have professional mode, calm, photo, and it has IMAX enhanced where the Samsung doesn't support that. So this is the Samsung in cinema mode and the Sony in IMAX enhanced. So overall, I want to give this to Sony as far as the colors, but I want to give it to Samsung as far as the shadow details. One thing I will point out about Sony is that it doesn't label HDR, but the Samsung does. But we're going to go ahead and reset these back to factory so we can finish up some more comparison. So here's some dirty screen effects. As far as uniformity, both TVs are going to be great. So I don't think you have any problems whatsoever. One thing I do notice is that the Sony again is more white, where the Samsung has a little bit more of a gray tint to it. Even as I get into these other levels, both TVs still do a great job. So again, you're not going to have pretty much any dirty screen effect on either TVs. After all, these are premium OLED televisions. Now checking out this upscaling, to me they look pretty much identical. Both TVs have the same amount of blur on them. Again, upscaling is not meant for 480p content, but I like to bring up this kind of content just because I want to see how these TVs do perform when you put the lowest resolution possible on them. But again, they perform almost identical. Of course, 1080p is the sweet spot, but I want to pause this scene and show you where those shadow details are definitely noticeable. If you look at the top of the lion's head right there, I can see a lot more definition in the black levels. On the Sony, it's not as defined as the Samsung, but I do like the colors on the Sony. Depends on what we're seeing, but again, it's like you're going to get the colors, but you're going to lose the shadow details. And that could be something that's important to some people, but we're really nitpicking here just to give you like an example of how both TVs perform. But overall, like I said before, you'll be happy either way. It's just what the little details that's going to affect your buying decision would be based off of some of the stuff that I'm talking about on this video. And when it comes to motion, they seem about the same to me. Only thing I noticed is on the Sony, there's a little bit of artifacts on the second line down, but overall, they look pretty much identical. Now, one thing you can notice on the Sony, if you look at the colors of the screen, again, it has that more natural look to it to me. But let's switch over to 60 frames per second. At 60 frames per second, both TVs look fantastic. So you're not gonna have any issues whatsoever with that type of signal on it. Now, keep in mind, I have made a full video on both TVs, so you can go check that out if you want to see more. But this just kind of go through some quick demos so you can see the difference between the two TVs. Now we're moving over to gaming, and just so you know, if you press and hold the play pause button on the Samsung, you get this gaming menu where you can do the game genres. You have a virtual aiming point, a mini screen zoom, and you do have some more features up here. And this is including mini map detection, surround sound, and a black EQ. And you do have a game expert picture mode. On the Sony, if you press and hold down the menu button, you get their pop-up, and they have a lot of the same things, like you have your picture mode, variable refresh rate. This one also has a motion blur reduction, black EQ, full screen, a crosshair, and you can do some different things on the Sony, such as multi-view gaming, where you can have YouTube on one side of the TV while you game on the other side of the TV. And that's something you could do in the Samsung with the multi-view as well. Some other things I want to point out is that the Samsung will support up to 165 Hertz, and that's using a PC, but on the Xbox, you're going to get 120 Hertz. Another thing I want to point out here is that the Samsung doesn't support Dolby Vision, and if I didn't have these two connected together, the Sony will support Dolby Vision, and that includes Dolby Vision Game. Both TVs do support ultra low latency and variable refresh rate. And just like I mentioned, you do have Dolby Vision Gaming on the Sony where you don't get that on the Samsung. Looking at these icons, I can say that the Samsung definitely pops. If you look at the green here, it is very vibrant, where the Sony is a lot more flatter. So that's something that you may or may not care about if you like those punchier colors. And one of the interesting things, switching over to this, it seems like the lag on the TVs are about the same, where when I was using another device, the Samsung was loading up much faster. And I did see that on someone else's video as well. So I want to load up a game so you guys can see the difference in the colors. And man, even though the Sony looked flat on the icons, once it's got a signal, you can see that it is producing a lot better colors. Now, as far as the inputs, I would say that the Samsung has the Sony beat because it does have 4 HDMI 2.1s, and the Sony has 2 HDMI 2.0s and 2 HDMI 2.1s. Now, looking at this game right here, I really like the colors on the Samsung better. So I really have some insights of what I think about these two TVs, and I'll talk about it in just a minute. But as you can see here, the colors are great on both of them. The Sony has more of a more natural look, where the Samsung has that punchier look. I mean, just look at those reds on there, and the video might not do it much justice, but as you can see here, both TVs are very responsive. I don't think you have any problems with either television. Now, you're probably wondering what I think about these TVs. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. First of all, when it comes to the Sony Bravia 8II, I like the natural colors on it, and it's a great looking television. I also like that it's easier to use because it has the Google operating system. The Tizen operating system is great, and it has a lot of functionality, but I think for a consumer, it's not as easy to use overall. I don't like the fact that the Sony has 2 HDMI 2.1s and 2 60 Hertz ports. And I don't like the fact that on Sony, you have to go in and manually switch it over to VRR or enhanced to be able to do your gaming unless you have a PS5. So it's kind of like one of those things where you have to do some manual setup on the Sony in comparison. But once you get it all dialed in, the picture is great. The Sony also has built-in calibration for Sony Picture. It has built-in calibration for Netflix and Prime Video. So everything that you look on the TV, is going to be calibrated from the factory if you use the built-in native applications. Now, when it comes to the Samsung, better shadow details. On some scenes, I thought it was a little bit brighter, but one thing about the Samsung is that the picture is more saturated, so it's going to look like it has a lot more vibrant colors. Another thing about the Samsung, it has 4 HDMI 2.1 cable inputs, so you can actually put your gaming console on all the different inputs and always get the faster performance. Another thing about the Samsung, it automatically selects your gaming consoles, so you're going to have that feature as well. Now, when it comes down to it, I'm going to choose the Sony for movies, the Samsung for gaming, and this is the overall value that I give these televisions, but I think you can go either one and you'll be fine. That's all I got. I'm Tech Steve. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.